We're on now.
Okay, we're live on YouTube and we've
Okay,
it's been about a minute. We can proceed, I guess.
okay, we'll get started. Then when the mayor gets here, he'll jump in. Okay, today is Tuesday, October 20th, 5:05, School Committee of the Whole. Roll call of the members.
Mrs. Bronston Rizzo,
Here.
Mr. D'Ambrosio,
Here.
Mr. Ferranti,
Here.
Ms. Cravellisi,
Here.
Mr. Mr. Sanella,
Here.
Ms. Ty,
Here.
Mayor Rigo.
The mayor is absent.
Okay, first agenda item, consent calendar. 1A, approval of the minutes.
So move.
Second.
Roll call.
Mrs. Bronston Rizzo,
Aren't we doing the consent calendar together?
Oh, true. Sorry about that. Yeah, I'm still on Aruba time. Okay. Next on the agenda, my brain's still in Aruba. Next on the agenda are the warrants, which are attached. Any questions for Mr. Cruz? Mr. Ferranti?
Thank you, Susan. Matt, I've got two questions about the warrants and then one general question. On page 5, it's just basically where on 177, 178, we did some sprinkler system repairs. I was just wondering which school that was, or schools.
Oh, Impact Fire Services, which of the 8 school buildings?
Were they all the schools or just a particular school?
No, the repairs would have been done at a specific school. Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head. Well, I can pull the PO, which would specify it in the general note. I'll send it to you.
Okay. And going further down, there's 3 Amoresco things, and I think 2 of them are on monthly agreements, like 62,000. But there was one for 60,000. I'm not sure what that was for, and that's number 193.
Right.
Looks
So
like
the
60,308.
Yeah, the 6270 is just 2 monthly payments happening to hit within the 30 days of the period that I'm reporting on here. The 60 would have been a larger project that they would have done outside the scope of that. Carl solicits quotes individually based on Schedule C of that arrangement. I'm not sure if that was something prepping for school return COVID related, because Amoresco has done some of that, or a project that was already underway. That's 5243. Same
If you
thing.
could just send it to us, I'd appreciate it.
I'll pull the detail on the sprinkler system and that specific Amoresco payment, but that would
And I
not.
just have 2, okay. And I just have 2 general questions.
Yep.
The cleaning services this month was about 180,000. I don't have the exact number. Is part of that due to getting ready for school with the COVID and everything?
Right. If you
Because it
look,
seems higher than normal for the month.
yep. If you look at the cleaning services purchase orders that we have, each for each individual school, you would see that this year there are 2 distinct lines. So the first line is the standard cleaning that would be done whether or not we were in a pandemic. We would have gone out to bid off the state contract for those services on a monthly basis and landed on a vendor to do that. That's the first line that you would see. Then you will see a second line that we've encumbered that we're charging to coronavirus relief funding for additional supplemental complementary COVID related cleaning that is happening on a regular basis throughout the school year. And it is happening regardless of whether or not we have 75 students coming, because the buildings do have people in them. So there's a second line. We're receiving distinct invoicing for that to be able to track it properly. And that's why you're going to see that number higher than you've seen it in the past.
Is that part of the Cvrf grant that Diane applied for and we did receive? Is that the money where that's coming from?
the first grant that we're charging for additional cleaning services is called the Cvrf Grant, Coronavirus Relief Fund.
Right.
And it exists specifically for getting schools in shape for whatever kind of learning we're doing this year. If there's additional services that happen, that grant expires December 31st, so we'll charge everything we can there. Then we have a second coronavirus related one, the one that you just mentioned that has some cleaning services potential in it as well. But that's a backup. We're beginning with the Cvrf grant. And if you went to the POs, you would see that account being hit.
So all the COVID cleaning is covered through grants. So it's not costing the school department any additional money.
Right. And not just cleaning, but equipment, perishables, cleaning solutions, all of that. Superintendents have been hustling to build these budgets for those grants, and Carl's been expending out of those funds, not appropriated funds. That's right.
Yeah, because when I went to page 9, there's about 115,000 worth of COVID supplies. So that's coming out of the
Right.
grants also.
Yeah. Yeah, so we had 3 grants that we received this year that were specifically related to COVID. And 2 of them, Michael, between you and Matt, you've just discussed. The first is the Cvrf, Coronavirus Relief Fund, which is specific to reopening schools and has to be expended by the end of December.
Excuse me, Diane,
so-
how much was that grant for?
That was about 1.6 million.
Okay.
And we did review these back a few months ago. I can give you another update if you like next month. The second grant was specific to technology. And that was a $318,000 grant that we had to give matching funds through our ESSA grant. And we used those funds to get the 1,200 Chromebooks that already arrived.
Right.
And another shipment of Chromebooks that we anticipate in December that will be on hand to either replace broken devices, give to any teachers who feel like they need to use, who haven't received yet a school device and feel like they want one, and then some to keep on hand in preparation for MCAS testing, which we understand is not going to be excluded this year. We'll see exactly how that's going to go, but we need to make sure we had devices on hand for that. And then the third grant is the ESSER grant. And I think I want to say that was 2.4 million, Matt, does that sound right?
Yep.
But that grant is good all the way through next September.
Yep.
So we are kind of like, we have money built into all of the grants around technology, PPE, security, sanitization, and technology, but we're expending the ones that expire first and holding on to the other money to see where we are January, February, March. Is there a vaccine? Are we able to come back to school? If so, we have the right things in place to make sure we're able to do that effectively. And if not, we'll take another look at that grant and see if we need to submit an amendment and change how we've allocated some of the line items there.
Well,
So for example,
go ahead.
one of the ones that we looked at in the Cvrf grant, the one that expires in December, we had put a chunk of money in there for transportation, anticipating that if we were able to do a hybrid in the first half of the year, we would roughly need to double the number of buses and vehicles that we use so that kids could effectively social distance when they're traveling to school. But because we're not in hybrid, we're not spending that money. And so this week, Danielle and Matt and I sat down and did a first amendment on that grant. And one thing that we did learn that we didn't know we were going to be able to do is that we could actually charge unemployment costs to that grant. And the state approved that as an expenditure. So we took $450,000 that we had put aside for transportation that we now know we don't need right now. And we're sending an amendment in to have that $450,000 reallocated for unemployment insurance, which will save our own budget that same $450,000.
Right.
Good
So
news.
if we happen to run out of money, will the state or the federal government kick us money to keep doing what we're doing? whether the kids get back or not?
So that's a really good question, and one that I did pose to the commissioner last week. The question that I had was, because we put the transportation costs, most of them into our CVRF grant, and that expires in December, what's going to happen if we're able to come back in February, let's say, and we don't have those grant funds anymore because they expired in December, but now we need the transportation money to get more buses and more transportation costs. And so the commissioner was going to go back and they were going to talk on their level about that. And I know that they're looking at different ideas of ways to offset that. The one I suggested, and I don't know if they're going to let us do that, but let us charge all of our outside special ed transportation costs to the grant and keep our own budgeted transportation money on hand so that we'll have that if we are able to reopen later in the school year. But we don't have a firm answer yet on how that's going to play out, but it's definitely a conversation that we're having at the state level.
No, hopefully it won't come to that.
Right.
Yeah.
Thanks, Susan. I'm all set.
Yeah,
Thank you, Michael.
Thanks for everybody to keep track of it.
Any other members have any questions for Matt on the
Yes,
warrants?
Susan.
Yes, Mr. Snella.
Yes, Matt. Diane made reference to transportation. Numbers 75 through 80, NCJ Transportation and Transportation Express, homeless transportation. Diane, maybe you can elaborate. I know we have homeless children that we transport back in, but where are these children coming to? If they're at a hotel someplace, or where are they being, what are we paying transportation for? From where to where?
So we also have homeless kids that are going to school at private special ed schools or going to schools in districts where school is open. And depending on where they're sheltered, we shoulder the burden of some of those costs, especially as they're initially homeless, until they're able to make a permanent residence either back in Revere or in another district. If it's back in Revere, then we pay the full cost. If they end up finding permanent residence in another district, then they become a student of that district after 1 year. I don't know, Matt, if you want to add to that.
That's right. Some of those bills that you're seeing will be for students who are both special educational and homeless students. And the transportation department, depending on an arrangement with the host city, may list them as homeless, but they're being transported also because it's a private school. Also, the homeless, often it will be months before that is tied out logistically. So some of those bills may have been for May and June of the previous year, finally receiving accurate bills that Seth and I are happy with, and the check is getting cut off of an older PO in the month of August or September. So that'll be
But children with special needs, their transportation comes under another expenditure, not on the homeless.
If they are homeless and their school is open, that line could show up either as a special education charge or a homeless charge. Both of those are ending up on the reimbursements that we're getting. So it depends the way that they get categorized when they come in.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Diane, under new hires, will that come later, or are we talking about this on the budget?
Yeah, we haven't gotten there yet.
Okay,
Fred.
thank you.
We're still on warrants. That's okay. Any other questions on the warrants for Mr. Cruz?
No?
So
No?
there's no other financials tonight. Next month, we'll both have a quarterly report for the start of FY21. And also we'll be able to deal with our carry forward into this fiscal year at the next meeting, and Ways and Means will probably have a conversation on that in the interim. So they've closed the fiscal year at City Hall. So we're able to start to move on some of that reporting with you in the month of November. So we'll do that, but there's no other financials for tonight.
And Michael, Robin will get in touch with you tomorrow to try to schedule a Ways and Means subcommittee. and
Okay,
get that set up before our November 17th meeting.
all right, sounds good.
Okay,
Okay. Very good.
great.
So have a good night, Matt.
See you later, man.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on, as Mr. Cruz mentioned, there are no other financials, but the next agenda item on the consent calendar would have been food service financials, which is none, financial reports, which is none. The next is communications, which is attached, request of high school diploma to honor Mr. Alfred G. Aroa, RHS class of 1959. Stacy, did you want to read that as a secretary, or we are mobile right now? Do you want me to read it for you? Are you-
She's muted.
Okay, you're muted.
You can
There.
read it now if people need it read, if they haven't read it, but it probably should be read on the floor. So I would
You
ask
want-
for that to be pulled off the consent calendar.
Okay, and bring it to the floor for the vote.
It's up to the will of the committee.
That's fine.
Okay,
That's fine.
That's fine.
I think it's a
Okay.
nice thing to share with the public.
agreed. So we'll move
Or-
on.
Someone else will start asking for it too, so it can go either way. But it's only a piece of paper, so it doesn't hurt.
Okay, so we are going to pull that from the consent calendar and read that letter on the floor with a vote from the committee. Okay, next on the agenda is enrollment update, which is none. Next agenda item is personnel items, which are attached. Mr. Sinella, did you have questions on that?
Yes, on the new hires. You got a new ROTC hire. Why would we be hiring an instructor for ROTC? It makes no sense to me. I mean, at least I know ROTC, they have classes, they parade, they present the flag and everything else, Diane. What's the purpose on this?
So they do also have full class schedules during the day. The kids are enrolled in JROTC classes. And one of our instructors left at the end of last year. We knew he was leaving. That was Warren Ames, was moving out to California. So we actually started the work with the US Army in January. Believe it or not, that's how long it takes. To actually start finding a replacement for him so that we could continue our JROTC program. There are parameters that we have to meet in order to have a program, including number of staff based on the number of students enrolled and all of those pieces. So we did start that work back in January to find a replacement for I forget what his title was, if he was Sergeant Ames or shame on me for not knowing that, but we did begin that process with the Army back in January, February to find his replacement. We did hold off on replacing him until Mr. Ames left. His official last day was June 30th. Their first and last days don't go by the school calendar. They go by the military. And so he left on June 30th, and we officially hired his replacement. I believe it was actually in August. I don't have that right in front of me, his exact hire date.
But you had your senior class moved on, so whatever members of ROTC that were part of that are no longer here. Your incoming freshman class, to my knowledge, hasn't signed anybody up. So you're talking sophomore and junior class. Two employees can't handle that. You need a third.
Well,
You're
the
missing
current
50% of
seniors,
your kids.
the current seniors are still participating too. So you have sophomores, juniors, and seniors, and they haven't started their recruiting campaign with the freshmen yet. But I don't have the exact information on that, Fred. I believe that it's typically sophomores, juniors, and seniors who are enrolled in JROTC.
But your freshman last year would not have counted as your sophomore class this year. So
They are.
technically, all you have now are juniors and seniors.
No,
Why
Oh,
wouldn't they
that-
count?
Right, but even if they were freshmen last year, Fred, they would know about JROTC and would have
Yeah.
signed up for JROTC classes when they did their enrollment last March, when the kids picked their classes. So they would still be enrolling in those classes and be interested in participating in JROTC.
Okay, but you
I-
hired not knowing what the numbers are. Do you have actual numbers if there's 200 kids, 150, 300 kids?
I can get that information for you. I do know that
Well,
their
it's
enrollment
immaterial
is,
because you already hired the person. What I'm trying to figure out is,
well, one of the things that's really difficult in COVID is that we can't plan in February, March, and April. In February, March, and April, when we're trying to plan for the school year, we're thinking that we were going to be back to school full time. When we got to June, July, we started to say, well, we can't come back full time. Let's figure out the hybrid model. It was August when we said we can't come back in hybrid. We need to do full remote. By the time we get to August, a whole lot of decisions have already been made, and we've already tried to put things in place for what might have been. And so there are circumstances, and this might be one of them. I can certainly look at what the enrollment is in JROTC. I know it is down from what it was last year and the year before. And I think that does have to do with COVID, and the kids are taking fewer classes right now because we adjusted their schedules, and some kids who might have liked to take JROTC might not have that opportunity this year if they had to do a makeup course because maybe they didn't earn credit last spring. There's a lot of different things that weigh into it, but I will say that the JROTC program is one of our most well-liked by students.
they made a convert out of me when they first came. I never thought
Yeah.
it would fly. But are these instructors able to teach remote? I mean, have they been part of the teachers' training?
Oh, yeah, they've done all of the
Yeah.
professional development of the teachers. They do everything that they do. They follow the teacher's schedule, and then they have other responsibilities that they have to do as well.
Okay.
And they're still meeting those other guidelines. One of the conversations we had to have last week was about the Snow Angel project, which is their service learning project. And we don't think that they're going to be able to do that this year because there is concern about sending kids to do snow removal, which is a heavy laborious activity, kind of like we don't let the football team practice. We can't let the JROTC kids go shovel snow. So they're actually working on developing a different service learning project this year where they're developing their MOS, they call it, right now, and it's going to be shared with the elementary principals. And eventually we're going to have a team of JROTC cadets who are going to be on hand to do on-demand tutoring of elementary students. There'll be a platoon assigned to each of the 6 elementary schools, and that's what they're going to do for their service learning project this year.
Okay.
And that will help with the online learning and a lot of the other angst that I think parents have around trying to help their kids do the remote learning at home.
All right. One other thing, Diane, on the permanent subs that have been hired, is there any proviso for someone who may have been a permanent sub 1 year, 2 years, 3 years against somebody just coming in? Is there a scale? I know they come in on what the teacher's minimum scale, so that if you have a permanent sub on their 3rd year, would they be 3rd year teacher salary?
Yes, they would be.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
The
Thank
permanent
you.
subs who are on a contract and get paid based on the salary are members of the Revere Teachers Association. They're full-time teachers. They're just not assigned to a particular classroom. And I actually said to Danielle a couple years ago, and we haven't quite figured this out, but we need to change the name because people associate permanent sub with substitute as opposed to a full-time contracted teacher. And we should think of a different name for them to distinguish them a little bit. But they have the same standing as any other hired teacher, and they get evaluated and all of that.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Any
Susan, one question,
other
please.
questions? Yes, Mr. Ferrante.
Diane, on the resignations where we had 5 aides and 2 teachers, were that personnel, was that replaced or they just were let go and that's it?
The resignations were people who chose to leave us. And where we need to replace somebody, we are replacing them. I forget exactly the RMA teacher. Danielle, can you refresh my memory on?
Yep, I'm just trying to look at the,
I know the Wayland one was going to be doing math interventionist work. And she did not want to do that work and found a job elsewhere.
I don't remember why the other teacher left, but he was replaced. He was a core content area teacher, I believe.
And Danielle, what about the aides? Did we replace the aides or we just would take them as we need them?
Go
We've
ahead.
been doing those as we need them because we don't necessarily need all of them, but we're replacing the ones in positions that we do, or if we have an additional aide currently still on staff who's not maybe being optimized, then we do a move.
And one of them, Michael, was a resignation from, she took a leave of absence last year and then ended up resigning later.
Yeah, so it wasn't really an open position because somebody had been put in there already.
Okay. Thank you. All set.
Any other questions? Seeing none, we'll move on. The next agenda item is the acceptance of donations and gifts, which we do have two. Does the committee wish to remove this from the consent calendar and bring it to the floor so we can read it?
Yes.
A
Yes.
motion to move to the floor, please.
Second?
Second,
Okay, so we will be bringing that to the floor so we can read and let everyone know about the generous donations that we received. Okay, next agenda item on the consent calendar is school field trips, which is none. That ends the consent calendar. Agenda item number 2 is regular meeting agenda items and miscellaneous items. Dr. Kelly?
So our main agenda for tonight, sorry, I'm shuffling my papers as things get added to the other agenda. There are several presentations tonight. The first one is that we're going to welcome Principal Alexander Phillips of the Wayland School, who you have not officially met yet. And so he's going to, as is tradition, I'll give a brief introduction, and then Mr. Phillips will introduce himself, give a little bit more background. The committee can ask any questions they might have of him. And after that, Mrs. Willett and part of her team from the Susan B. Anthony is going to talk about their advisory program, which is representative of advisory across the district, but we thought it would be a good idea for the school committee and for the public at large who might be watching this to better understand what happens in advisory and how it's organized and all of those pieces. So one thing I should mention that we're going back to, we haven't done this in a while because of COVID, but we want to go back to the format where at each school committee meeting, there are 1 or 2 presentations either from the school level or from the district curriculum office or athletics, some other department, to help make sure the work of the district is being understood. So we have put together a list and schools have signed up for when they'd like to present based on when they anticipate they'll have something of note to share. So Mrs. Willett will be presenting with her team tonight. And then the second presentation is going to be from the curriculum office. And they're going to do a presentation on student assessment in the remote learning environment, which we hope will be helpful to the committee and also to parents at home and understand, you know, it's a good question that people ask, how do you give a test when the kids are at home and the teacher's in the classroom? And, you know, how do we ensure that that test is accurate and represents what the child knows and not what they maybe looked up on the internet or got help from somebody else or, you know, things of that nature, which sometimes happen. And then the final presentation is going to be by Dr. Mokaba. And she's going to give an update on engagement and attendance. And I had been sending you in my weekly updates some information about what the attendance rate was across the district. Danielle's going to share a little bit more detail by grade span, and also talk about our engagement numbers and how we are measuring engagement at the different grade spans. So not just attendance, but how our kids actually engaging with the work. I'm happy to report that we have a student representative. Ryan Doucette was elected at Revere High School and will be joining us tonight. So Ryan will have his first report to the committee. Trying to think of what else. That might be about it.
Diane, I have a question for you.
Sure.
Susan?
Go ahead, Michael.
Yes, Mr.
Okay.
Ferranti?
Yeah, Diane, we want to have a Ways and Means meeting. Are we going to do it before the meeting, or just we're going to pick a date between now and, are we just going to do it, like I said, the day of the meeting?
I think that maybe Matt and I should meet with the Ways and Means subcommittee first,
Okay.
like next week or the week after, and look at what the carry forward is, and talk a little bit of strategy. And then we could share that with the full committee.
Carol and Anthony, do you have a preference of time? So when I talk to Robin tomorrow?
I do not have a preference for time.
Anthony?
Whatever's convenient for you.
Probably whatever works for you guys will work for me. I mean,
Okay.
Mid-morning is probably best, but
Okay.
if you give me a time range, I'll be able to say more specifically.
Yeah, I'll give you a couple 3-day notice so we can work it out. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. I'm all set, thank you.
So 2 other things I just want to call to your attention. I did send you an email tonight with a list of clubs and activities that principals are hoping to implement sooner than later. If you want to take a look at those, it's not complete. If I get more information from the schools that I'm missing, I'll forward that as soon as I get it. And then the other thing that I wanted to mention, we sent a notice home to parents tonight, and I shared it. We shared it with the whole district today too, about how we can have effective conversations about politics, civics, and the election. We've learned many times in the past that sometimes those conversations can be difficult to have. And what we're hoping to do in sending that letter and doing a lot of work with our teachers are engaged in about 3 hours of professional development this week, maybe 2 hours, around how to navigate conversations and how to ensure that we're having conversations that honor diverse opinions and welcome people into conversations instead of shutting people down based on their opinions. So I just wanted to highlight that. And there are 3 links on the document that you would have got on the email tonight that are worthy reading. We hope that parents will read those documents as well. We provided them in 4 languages. And those documents will be used by teachers over the course of this week to help prepare them for conversations. And while we do feel like these conversations should be focused in our history and civics classes, we know that organically conversations will come up in math or in phys ed or wherever else. And so we want to ensure that all of our teachers are well prepared to navigate those discussions.
It's a wonderful letter.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Any other members have any questions for Diane? Diane, I have one question about the clubs that you sent the email earlier. Now, will these be happening if we go back hybrid, or do they plan on doing these remotely? And how are they going to get them started?
Yeah, so we asked them to focus on, we know that it doesn't make sense for all clubs and activities to run right now. But we also know that we have a number of kids who are anxious to have more engagement and a number of parents who would like their kids engaged in other ways with school. And so principals did talk to students and put together a list of their priority clubs that they'd like to get started. And their intention is to start them soon, and that they would be virtual to begin. And then they would follow whatever mode of learning we have at a particular time. If we're able to come back to hybrid at some point, then the club would actually meet in a hybrid fashion after school like it normally would. Only half of the club members would be in on 1 week, roughly. I mean, if it happens to be that a club has, because our kids are cohorted alphabetically, you know, it could be that a lot more than half of the kids are in school on 1 week, in which case the advisor would make some adjustments with students and see who might be able to switch to come to the club on a week when they're not actually in school. They'd try to work that out, or maybe have a virtual component there too. And when we are able to come back for full in-person learning, then the club would resume under its normal organization.
That would be great. I'm sure there's a lot of kids that are really, you know, looking forward to getting back to some normalcy.
Right.
Will they be starting this soon, or are they?
Yeah,
When's the
yeah,
start
we are
date?
hoping that they can start soon. We would like a blessing for this from the school committee. I know that the money is budgeted. When we talked about it briefly the other day, folks wanted to take a look at what was intended for the clubs. And I think the principals did a really good job. At the schools that have already been able to say what clubs they want to run, I think they've done a good job selecting a diverse format of clubs. Like I think if I look at the middle schools in particular, there's something that has to do with art or music or the such. And then there are, you know, several of them put a student government on there. Their Gay Straight Alliance, which we know is a huge support network for a lot of students. And so I really think they did a good job prioritizing those areas that have high demand from students. And I know that that was their impetus in making selections. One question.
No, I
that
agree.
came
They
up-
did a really good job. Oh, go
Yeah.
ahead. Sorry.
One question that came up around, and I think that we might hear from Ryan about this tonight, is that a number of the student groups are struggling with fundraising because they're not able to hold their typical fundraising events. So we
Yeah.
probably should start thinking about that. It's not a decision that we need to make right away, but in the middle schools, their yearbook club usually does fundraisers to pay for the yearbook. And obviously the senior class, I don't know if we're going to be able to have a prom and all of those other class day, all of those events. We don't know where we'll be in the spring, but we should take steps now to prepare for the possibility that they might be able to have those events. And then how would they be paid for? Because typically those kids are doing fundraisers all year
Yeah.
long to prepare for those events. So I'll just put that on your radar. We can see what Ryan, if Ryan brings it up tonight. He and I had talked a little bit about it, which is why I anticipate he might bring it up. But if not, it's probably something that we should start thinking about in the next couple of months so that we're prepared for the spring.
Okay. Any other members have any questions for Diane? Seeing there's none, and is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make
So
a motion.
move. Second?
Okay, motion to adjourn.
Can we acknowledge that the mayor joined us about 15 minutes ago? We should say that.
Hi, everyone.
Yes.
Sorry I'm late.
Hi, Mayor Arrigo. Thank you for joining us. Better late than never at all.
And I will say I won't be joining you for the next meeting.
Oh, we will miss you.
We will miss you.
I doubt
Susie.
it.
Oh,
I
Are
doubt it.
are you
but
actually in a car?
yes, I'm in a funeral parking lot.
Oh, no.
Oh,
So
I'm sorry.
it's all right. It's all right.
Okay, so we will adjourn.
15 minutes.
Let's see. 5:44. And we have 15 minutes.
See you in 15
Until-
minutes.
Our meeting. All right.
See you at 6 o'clock.